Welcome to the Thrive TV show with Lauren Parsons, helping you boost your health, energy, and productivity.
Hi there, and welcome to another episode of the Thrive TV show. I'm Lauren Parsons, your host, and today I'm joined by Gillian Brookes from Wellington, who's a flexible work specialist. So welcome, Gillian.
Thank you. Thanks, Lauren.
So lovely to connect with you. And today we're talking about how to get bold with flex. And we're talking about flexible working, which has become so important, but Gillian has been focusing on this for quite some time. So today she's going to share why flex isn't done yet, why bolder flex is worth it, and some tips for your flex success. So before we get into that, I'd love to just do my this and that questions, if that's okay, Gillian.
Yeah, of course. Fire away.
So tell me, spots or stripes?
Spots.
Spots,
Yeah.
okay, nice.
Yeah, I love polka dots. Yeah.
Cats or dogs?
Oh, definitely dog person. Yeah.
Dog, nice. Would you rather be go a month without your car or a month without the internet?
Month without my car, I think. Yeah.
Nice. Would you rather be beachfront or mountaintop?
Beachfront. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Fresh salad or cooked vegetables?
Oh, that depends on the weather. I think today I'd probably go with vegetables.
Yeah, nice. And last one is, would you rather be able to play 10 musical instruments beautifully or speak 10 languages fluently?
Oh, 10 languages, easy. Yeah.
The same, wouldn't that be amazing? Wonderful. Well, Gillian Brookes is a flexible work specialist. Her book, Flexperts, Getting the Best from Flex in a World That's Ever Changing, is expected to be out by the end of the year. And she spends her time creating more flexible workplaces and running a free access working parents network. She lives in Wellington with her 2 daughters. And I'd just love to, perhaps if you can start, Gillian, by just sharing with us, how did you get into what it is that you're doing now?
Yeah, thanks, Lauren. So I've had a career in HR for pretty much the last 20 years. And I came into HR through having studied economics, so quite an unusual pathway into the profession. And I was always interested in how to blend the best of people and the best of economy and business. And so that kind of took me into HR. And what I noticed was that as I took on bigger roles within the profession, kind of more senior leadership positions, I felt like I was really thinly spread, and it was actually quite hard to make the kind of impact I was really interested in. So about 3.5 years ago now, I made the decision to it was either keep going for the kind of the big HR GM roles or go out and kind of really focus in on flexible work. So I made the choice to focus in. And that was about mid 2019, and I've been doing it ever since.
Wow. Yeah. And what time? Yeah. I mean, yeah, mid 2019, obviously, before we realized how many of us would be working from home for those that are in industries that can. So
exactly. Yeah. And I had no idea the pandemic was coming. So I do not have a crystal ball. Yeah. So but so it turned out that it was good timing. Yeah.
And so you said that flex isn't done yet. So what do you mean by that? Tell us more.
So what I'm observing in the work I do every day is that flexible work as a topic has actually become quite narrow. We've really focused in on working from home and or hybrid working, which is obviously a mix of working from home and working from the office.
Mm-hmm.
And what that does is it becomes quite an exclusive club for about 30 to 40% of the workforce.
Yes.
And what we're accidentally doing is what should be available to everybody in some shape or form is actually becoming something that's only available to a select minority of people. And so part of my role is let's make sure we do hybrid and remote work really well, and let's open up the conversation to a much broader spectrum of flexible work so that it becomes something for everybody. Yeah.
Okay. So what do you say to people that work in hospitality, to people that work in distribution centres, to those that are in front-facing roles with customers, all those sort of things?
Yeah, great question. I think when workplace becomes the thing that's quite constrained, which is kind of what you're talking about, those frontline roles, healthcare, retail, those sorts of things, manufacturing, what we can do, first of all, is get really creative around the hours and days of work. Because if you can kind of get creative with things like roster systems and understanding how people get more of the hours and days that they would prefer to work, then that opens up some creativity first. The second layer that we can start to explore is actually things like job design or job crafting, which is how can we kind of tweak and shift the design of these jobs so that perhaps 5-10% of the work does become stuff that can be done from offsite, so that people do start to have access to the ability to work from home and experience that for themselves, so they don't feel excluded from kind of what everybody else is talking about and experiencing.
Yeah, because I can imagine, for some people that they, it's almost like the haves and the have-nots, who have the flexibility and who don't.
Exactly. And we're going to end up with a kind of a tiered workforce, which is just not going to be very cohesive, because most organizations have both of those types of workforces within them. And actually, if you start to have that division inside, it can start to kind of really,
increase silos, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. And it makes it really hard for people to feel connected and like they are part of one bigger organization. They have that sense of belonging to a purpose and a shared purpose. It can really get in the way. So we need to make sure it's something we're offering flex for everybody in a meaningful way.
So tell me, what do you see as the benefits of flexible work?
So I mean, there's a lot, but I tend to summarize them as higher levels of productivity, higher levels of well-being, and higher levels of retention. Those are the big ones, really. There are other benefits to the climate. The 4-day week has done some fantastic research to show the impact on your reduced carbon emissions if you're having people working fewer hours and working from home some of the time. So there's those benefits as well. But the big three that most people are really interested in are productivity, well-being, and retention.
So tell me, can you give me some, perhaps some examples or stories? Be really interested, because I'm totally on board with you on this. And if you can expand on perhaps, let's say in terms of productivity, what are those examples of how flexible work contributes to that?
No, great question. So there's a few examples. So the work that Nick Bloom does, who's a professor of economics from Stanford University, he's done lots of research for the last 20 years on remote work in particular. And what he shows time and time again is that when people are working remotely, they get through their work faster. So there's this short-term productivity gain, because they're not kind of distracted by this, the fun and games that happen in the office when we can kind of have those planned and unplanned interactions with each other. And also what we're learning about hybrid is when we do come together, more kind of deliberately collaborating and being more creative when we have that opportunity in the office together face to face, what that does is that really contributes to long-term productivity. So it's not that kind of immediate hit of, I've got through my to-do list much faster today. But what it does is it really builds on our ability to innovate and do things differently. And if we're not creating the conditions for us to come together and collaborate and get creative, then we're really going to miss out over the longer term with our productivity. So that's kind of one example of how things are playing out at the moment in terms of that productivity gain. The 4-day work week has also done some great research that shows that you can reduce people's working hours by 20%, and you can see productivity gains of 20 to 35%, depending on kind of how your industry is working and over what period you're measuring that productivity gain. So I'm really, in the work I'm doing, I'm really challenging this connection between the hours we work and our output or our productivity, because actually the link between those two things is really from an industrial era, which most of us are not in anymore. So it's that relationship is not a very clear one. We get to the point where not only have we got kind of diminishing productivity returns the longer we're working, but also counterproductive.
Absolutely. And I think that leads probably straight into your second point around well-being, which is where I work with organizations a lot around how do we boost well-being and productivity. That's my sweet spot and what I specialize in, because I think that those two things really work well together. And like you say, if people are just working longer hours and slogging away and working inefficiently, it's not good for them, it's not good for their families, it's not good for the organization. we're seeing burnout rates increasing. So so what you're saying is that by embracing more flexible working, being able to perhaps have some focused time that is uninterrupted, which for so many people is just golden. Although I often talk about, building golden hours into your days at work and things like that.
Yes.
Interested to hear any other stories or examples from your point of view on that link between flex working and wellbeing.
Yeah, so the well-being picture is, you've described it really well. It's that. So the way I think about well-being comes from Amartya Sen. He's kind of considered the founding father of well-being economics, and he came up with the capability approach to well-being. And the core principle of that is that we get to be and do what we value and have reason to value. Mm-hmm. And there's beauty and challenge in that. So the beauty is that no one can tell us what's good for us, right? Which is, a good thing, because that means paternalism and, kind of being told what to do is actually not going to work. The challenge in it, though, is that we need to know what we need or what we value. And sometimes that's quite unpracticed. And you talked about the burnout figures. Professor Gerard Haar, who's been tracking some of New Zealand's stats on burnout, you'll be aware. Yeah. He kind of produced some stuff around April this year that showed we're often our own worst judge of how close we are to burnout.
That study, yeah.
Yeah, right. And so what I do in my work is give people tools so that they can find their own way into what does meaningful flexibility look like for me, so I can kind of individualize it, so I can get that wellbeing boost. And it might look quite different to my colleague who perhaps does the same work as me, but we have really different ways of thinking about what we need. And giving people space to have that conversation with each other, explore it for themselves, and reach some conclusions that blends these ideas of what does delivery look like in my job? What's the nature of my work right now? And then blending that with the well-being and preferences that I have is the overlap of those two things that really is the most powerful way of exploring flexible work options.
And just to expand a little bit on that study by Gerard Haar, I believe, and I don't know the exact numbers, but it looked at about 40%, I think it was, of people self-diagnosed as heading towards burnout, and yet the majority actually were showing signs of heading towards burnout. Am I right with that?
Yeah. It was kind of quite shocking. Hey, that was the big takeaway for me, was that we really don't know how close we are most of the time. Until it's a bit late.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, it's a bit like hypothermia. Sometimes we don't know that it's happening until it is too
late.
Yeah. So tell me, just to look at it from the other point of view, when you're talking about people figuring out how they want to work and what they value and what's important, if I was looking at it from the other point of view, from a leader's point of view, for leaders that are saying, well, how's that going to work? I've just got this work that needs to be done. What do you say to people that are skeptical about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you can imagine I've worked with lots and lots of chief execs and senior leaders who have that exact worry, right? Because they're still accountable for delivery. We've still got a job to do. Yes, I want to retain people and I want to attract the right people, and I want them to be well when they're here. But ultimately, we've got a business to run. And so the way into that is by making sure everyone has a way of exploring what does their job look like right now and according to whom. Because so often when flexible work arrangements fall down, it's because the choices, so this, perhaps if the choices I'm making around the hours, days, or place of work are the unintended consequences of that, might be letting down a colleague, particularly outside my team. Actually, that's more likely. And so when that happens, eventually the resentment builds up, and there's kind of a messy kind of breakdown of those relationships in the workplace. And so what we need to do is, and I've got a set of tools which helps people explore, first of all, who are those people who I rely on and who rely on me to get work done, so I can test my thinking with them first and set these kind of safe boundaries within which I can play when it comes to flexibility. And that way everyone wins, because the employer's getting what they need done and in a really productive way, and those relationships are tight and working well as within those boundaries of delivery, I get as much well-being as I can out of this safe space to play.
And
Yeah,
therefore, we're ensuring the sustainability of our workforce. Yeah.
that's
It's
right.
actually
That's
saying
right.
moving away from, like you say, that industrial model of working and valuing the amount of time that people are at work or in the building,
Yes.
and looking at valuing what's their productivity, what are their outputs. And so
Yeah.
I guess my mind then jumps to, well, how do we do that well?
Yeah.
Because it can be a lot easier for people to say, well, I just want to count the number of hours that you're in the building.
Yes.
How do I measure the value that you are providing through the work that you're doing, whatever that is,
Yeah.
from what format? How do we measure that? Have you got some tips around that?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think quite often it's something that we're relatively unpracticed at doing anyway. And when we're, as a manager, what I always found is that I needed to know what people were focusing on, right? So I could see if we were producing the right sorts of things, or providing the right kind of service, in my case with, kind of running HR teams. So it's no different, actually. It's about making sure that those measures, those expectations are set and agreed up front. And then there's a way of meaningfully tracking progress against those things. And where they've come unstuck, it's often because of some external force, right? There might be, you get pulled in this direction because there's been a crisis over in this part of the business or whatever, and we've all had to divert our attention over here. And those things will inevitably crop up whether you're working flexibly or not. So it's just about maintaining really good kind of performance practice, and then layering over that these strong relationships and checking in with people, that they are making sure that the choices they're making around their flexibility are still backing up what delivery looks like. And having those conversations regularly and proactively is part of the process that I've built in these tools I've developed.
Great.
Yeah.
So can you tell me, do you have recommendations around, for hybrid work, working from home, let's say, and then from the office? Do you, for example, recommend that offices, have, say, Tuesdays, Thursdays as everyone's in the office, or have rules around there's no meetings at this time, or we always have meetings at this time? Just some practical, I guess, day-to-day ideas for leaders.
Yeah. So I'm glad you asked, because what I find is, so I have this mantra, right, which is tools, not rules. And the reason I have that is because what I would love is every workplace that has a set of flexible work tools that provide the consistency. Because what happens when we grab for rules, it's often because we don't have a process or a set of tools that we can rely on. And so we're trying to create a sense of certainty out of what feels a bit chaotic. And so we grab for things like, right, everybody has to be in the office on, Tuesdays and Thursdays or whatever it is. And what often happens when we grab for those rules is we're accidentally or inadvertently cutting off some really viable flex options for a minority of people. And they're often people who are working part-time, who feel like they're struggling to be the norm as it is. And so we end up kind of fueling our turnover, our staff turnover, when actually what we want to be doing is fueling our retention. And so by giving people a reliable set of flexible work tools, they can experiment and try based on the kind of unique factors of what work do we have in our team, and which individuals do I have in my team. And it's the unique factors that they then get to understand at a deeper level that then determines what they try out, rather than a blanket kind of policy, which is, right, everybody in on these days, which inevitably won't work for everyone.
And then my mind jumps to what's perhaps one of the other biggest objections is, what about connection? What about team dynamics? What about people staying in the loop? All of those, as you say, planned and unplanned interactions. I believe we can absolutely build connection by distance, but interested to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, so I have this kind of one-page remote work hack that I kind of use with a lot of the teams. And that's really about the pitfalls that we know when we're not together, physically in the same space, when we're distributed across, is we have challenges around connection, we have challenges around the type of work we tend to prioritize, and we have challenges around our wellness, and particularly our boundaries between work and home, because we're physically on the same space, right? And so when it comes to things like building connection, we need to just be really deliberate about it, and we need to experiment with it, and we need to keep coming back to it and trying new things. And those things need to be both planned and unplanned. So what I hear some teams doing some really cool stuff is, like, there was a manager who I was working with a couple of weeks ago, and he tried out the whiteboard function on their kind of video conferencing thing for the first time. So instead of having a physical room, which is how he'd normally do his planning meeting with his team, he tried it online. And what he was delighted to find out is that he had two benefits of doing it. One was that the whiteboard lived on. It wasn't just a photo that was the end of those 2 hours that was static and never changed again. So he was like, we got to just keep updating it. As we had questions that were unanswered in the room, we could kind of come back and update it, which was really cool. The second thing he loved is that there was one or two people who were really introverted thinkers in his team. And he was really used to not hearing much from those people and not really getting much of a contribution from them. What he noticed in this environment, in a virtual environment, is that they had space to reflect on their own and then come forward with their contribution in a way that he'd never seen before. And so what started out as a bit of a nervous experiment on his part, he was just like the world's biggest fan of doing things virtually from that point forward. Yeah. And equally, there's still real value in us coming together face to face. I absolutely, there's lots of research to bear that out too, but it's not that we have to wait and hold off all the time, to do that. And another important thing that I think a lot of people forget about is this idea of synchronous versus asynchronous connection. So synchronous is where we just all do things at the same time, like this conversation right now, right? So that's where you schedule something and you have it in your calendar and you're like, right, I have that conversation or this meeting at this time. When that becomes too hard, what we're noticing is that the window for scheduling is becoming smaller and smaller. So what we can do, the next best option is to go for asynchronous connection. And I really like using voice notes for that, because you've got the nuance of voice. You can have your questions, your wonderings, and everything that goes with the conversation. But I leave a voice note for a colleague, and then when they're ready and they've got a 5-minute slot to listen to my message, they can do that and respond. And it's not exactly the same as a conversation, but it's really close, and it's much better than just waiting and waiting and waiting until we're both available at the same time.
Yeah, or like I say, or sending an email where you're losing all the nuance of the tone and if you start getting into wondering, you sort of feel like you're just adding fluff. So I like, it's interesting. I use a combination, and I notice I have certain contacts and colleagues and clients who often will send me voice messages, and or sometimes I'll send them a voice message and they'll reply by text. And so I think it's great having, just broadening the options, isn't it? And like you say, a great example with doing planning in online forums, for example, and using whiteboards or as Miro or Mural or those sorts of post-it, virtual post-it note platforms, where, as you say, I think one of those great benefits of that in any sort of online meeting is that we can have everyone actually contributing ideas simultaneously via the chat, for example. Even if you're just using the chat and you've got no fancy technology going on, you can ask a question and invite everyone to reflect on it and share their thoughts, and you get 10 or 20 ideas all at once, rather than having to go around a room and take 20 minutes. So
exactly,
I think it's because it's fairly new for a lot of leaders, though. This is a skill, being able to maximize that. I often encourage some people to share, just to unmute and share verbally, but others to write in the comments. And as you say, I think that helps to meet those introverted, extroverted communication style needs and just get more going.
Yeah, absolutely. And I find often in those online environments, using the breakout rooms as well gives people a safer space to connect with each other. They feel much more open and able to share their thinking if they're in a pair or a three, and then come back, rather than, there's 20 people on this call, I don't want to say anything, So whereas if you're in a room, it's you can do that, but it's not as easy, So it's really good.
Yeah, I've been doing a lot of training with how to run great online meetings, and just how to do those things, because as you say, people don't want to necessarily share straight into a room of 20, but actually it can be done really well if you set the tone for that and you make that the norm.
That's right.
So I know that you said that you believe that bolder flex is worth it. So tell me, what do you mean by that?
Oh, yes, there's so much more we can do, right? So I'm just going to give you some stats to just kind of set the scene as to why there is space to do so much more. So a couple of things. So the Wall Street Journal did a survey earlier this year in 2022, 10,000 employees, and what they found is that most people are actually looking for flexible work hours over flexible workplace. And so, that kind of really backs up where we started this conversation around like hybrid. We are not done, just because we can do hybrid now, or we're learning to do hybrid. There's so much more to do. And there was some survey work that was done by the Public Service Commission to Mataho last year. So kind of surveying the public service. And what kind of doing some digging into the results of that. And what we can see there is that we've got about 80% of people who are working flexibly in some way here in New Zealand in the public service. Yet, despite that, about 75% of all people haven't yet got the type of flex that they would ideally want. And the Wall Street Journal article was saying it was about 73% of people still looking for something different. So can you imagine, like, kind of 3/4 of our workforce is still crying out for something that they haven't yet got access to. So that's just kind of gives us a sense of the scale of what's possible, where we've still got room to grow. And so what could that look like? So some of the things that I think we're not doing yet that we could do so much more with are the simpler things. It could be something like compressed hours, where we just let people do something like a 9-day fortnight, where they do their agreed weekly hours, a fortnight's worth of hours, but in 9 days rather than 10. So they just get that time back. We were talking before about well-being and burnout. It just puts some more boundaries around people's time for themselves versus time for work, and really kind of goes makes some inroads into our long hours culture here in New Zealand. So that's one simple thing we can try. Some other things that I would really love to see are things like job sharing. Now, job sharing is where you take a full-time role and 2 people share it in part-time hours. Normally 3 days a week each would be the typical job share arrangement. So it's slightly more than one person, but the benefits of that, according to some studies, is about for the extra, kind of 20% that you're putting into that, you get about a 30% benefit. So there's kind of some research around that there. And what that does is, if you've got a job that's not feasible really to do in part-time hours, you actually you don't put that glass ceiling over the quality of part-time work available, because those really big jobs that could do with a bit of extra capacity, they're all up for job sharing. And there's some great work that's been going on, particularly in the UK civil service, for the last 7 years or so, to show that this has been a really great talent strategy for them. So I'd love to see more of that. It's really hard to find job shares here in New Zealand. So that's another thing. And last but not least is just the shorter work week. Again, I think particularly in the context of the cost of living crisis that's here in New Zealand, as well as more broadly globally, what I'm noticing, and there's data to back this up, particularly in the Takawa Mataho study I was talking about, fewer people are working part-time now. And part of what's fueling that, in my mind, must be the cost of living. And so what people are doing is they're choosing to work full-time because they can maximize their income, but actually they don't have the space to do it. They don't have the capacity in their lives to work those hours. And so what they're doing is they're just running on empty, and it's not sustainable. Whereas if we cut the work week, not only do we shore up people's energy and they're more sustained over the longer term, they're more productive, So I would love to see us do more, something bolder in this space.
And it's a bit chicken and egg, isn't it, when you think of talking about cutting the work week and being more productive. And we know, as you say, from the studies from the 4-hour work week at Perpetual Guardian that was done, that what they found was that increase in productivity rather than a drop in productivity by dropping that day. And I just think of, I guess, the social impact of what you're talking about there, that if people are trying to work more hours than they normally would, or than perhaps is ideal for their family situation, for all of those, the ripple effects from that is going to be, a lot more challenges for, let's say, children that have parents that are no longer present, where there needs to
Exactly.
be all of those, the flow on that'll come from that.
That's right. That's right. And there's community volunteering roles, right, that people love to participate in. They want to make a contribution to their local community. But it's really hard to do that when you just feel maxed out and there's no energy left by the time you've got to you've limped through to the end of the week. So there's a lot to be gained, like you say. The social value of doing some of these things is really, I don't think we talk about that enough. Yeah.
And when we think of, Parkinsons Law that says that work will expand to fill the time available, that we know that, and I'm a big believer in this, we know, or they say that the average person delivers about 2.8 hours of effective work a day. So imagine if we can leverage that, imagine if we can increase that. And that's, that's my sweet spot of where I love working with, because we can really increase what we're doing by the way that we work, and then claw back that time and ring fence that time for time out, for downtime, or maybe for other productive work, but it's more strategic and thinking and creativity and innovation, all of those.
Exactly. Yeah. No, wouldn't that be great? Yes. And I think it's just feeling safe to give it a go, because it is countercultural here in New Zealand. We do have an issue with long hours. I was looking at Stats New Zealand. There's 35% of men are working more than 40 hours a week. And 17% of women as well. And you just kind of think this is not a sustainable way of working. And I know we've got a talent shortage, but we can't just keep piling on more and more work to the same few people. We've got to do something different.
So let's just finish off. I'd love to just hear practical tips for organisations, for leaders that are wanting to start out, that perhaps haven't done a lot. Where when they start?
Yeah. So the first top tip is have regular, proactive, team-based conversations. So if you're a leader, if you're a leader with a team, what I really would encourage you to do, if you make one change, is that you come out from the center, holding it all in the middle, all the decisions, and you come to the side and you regularly facilitate and participate in flexible work conversations with your team. So often it's the manager who's the one at risk of burnout, because they're trying to say yes to everybody else because they want to keep their team. They want to retain the great people they've hired. And they end up forgetting to kind of figure out how they're going to make this work for themselves. And actually, not only does that mean you're more sustained, but you're also a great role model for those who are aspiring to be a future leader. They don't want to see that all the leaders in their organisation are burning out. That's not the future they want to see for themselves. So it's really important that you participate in those conversations too. So that's the first tip. Second tip is, what do you talk about at those conversations? The two lenses are, what does delivery look like for each of us right now? So that we put those safe boundaries in place within which to play. So that's the first lens. The second lens is well-being and my preferences. So what do I actually want? Now I've worked out what's feasible. What are the things that really light me up? And then as a team, you explore that together. And what I love seeing when teams have those conversations is the empathy that builds, where rather than judging the behavior or the choices people are making, there's an understanding about where those choices are coming from. And that makes such a difference for the cohesion of the team as well. So that's the second tip.
Wow.
The third tip is just try stuff. Don't feel locked in. Like, the worst thing that happens is when flexibility becomes rigid. And that's not how it's meant to be. So the idea is that we're experimenting all the time and we're tracking our progress and we're monitoring that stuff with some really gentle metrics. The best metric that I recommend most teams fall back on if they can't think of anything else is scale of 1 to 10. How well is flex going for me right now? And what you want to see with your team with that score is that the score narrows, because it'll probably start out quite wide in its kind of range. So you want that score to be more consistent over time. And obviously over time, you also want to see it track up the scale. So they're my 3 top tips.
Right. And I guess, and then you can ask, and if it is at whatever number it's at, what's it going to take to move it up from a 5 to a 6 or from a 6 to a 7?
Exactly. And it's that nudging and what's the experiment we can try in the next month that might nudge it, and let's come back in a month's time and see if it did or not. And that way people are really clear about how we're going to measure success, and perception's okay. We can measure the perception of how it's going.
Fantastic. Wonderful. Oh, well, thank you for everything that you've shared. It's just been fantastic just to hear so many different ideas on why flex is important, how to be bolder with it, and tips to get started. So
Yeah.
if you want to find out more or get in touch with you, Gillian, what's the best way to do that?
Yeah, definitely. So best way to find me is on my website, which is gillianbrooks.co.nz, or you can look me up on LinkedIn. I'm often, kind of putting stuff out on LinkedIn with lots of top tips and ideas. So yeah, I'd love to be in touch.
Nice, fantastic. And if you're listening into this, or if you've perhaps not seen the video version of the Thrive TV show, just head to thrivetvshow.com, and all of those links for Gillian will be down below in the show notes as well. So fantastic. Well, thank you so much for your time. I'd just like to close with one final question, and that is, if there's one more thing you want to share with our listeners today, what would that be, Gillian?
Oh, I think set some intentions for your day and make sure that they are, kind of take into account your whole self. I think if we're going to have more good days where we feel like we're making progress on lots of different things that matter to us, then we're all going to get more of that productivity and well-being. So yeah.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much. Thanks for your time. And thank you to everyone that has tuned in. That's been another episode of the Thrive TV show. Go out and thrive.
Thank you for listening to the Thrive TV show with Lauren Parsons. Visit thrivetvshow.com to access the show notes and discover our fantastic bonus content. And be sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next inspiring episode.